All right, welcome to Ask the Conductor. My name is Larry Loh. I'm the music director of Symphoria. This is my son Charlie. He goes to FM, as you can see. He's a violinist. He plays in the Symphoria Youth Orchestra, or it's called the Young Artist Orchestra. And he's going to help me by reading some questions that were asked online on our Facebook page. And why don't you take it away, Charlie, with the first question? We have 4 questions.
Lauren asks, which piece of the program are you most looking forward to?
Most conductors and musicians would usually agree that you can't pick a particular piece that is your favorite Brahms. In fact, sometimes we're asked, what's your favorite Brahms symphony? And we usually will respond, the one that I'm working on right now. And so that is the 4th Symphony. But in this program, I'm most looking forward to conducting the first piano concerto, because it's a piece I've never conducted, and I get to do it with my friend Orion Weiss, and he's going to be spectacular. He and I have talked about doing that piece for years, and now we finally get to do it at our opening concert, which is this Saturday, September 21st.
And Marissa asks, what inspired Symphoria to program an all Brahms program?
This program first originated, a lot of times when we're programming, we'll start with a seed. And for that, for this program, it was the 4th Symphony. And the reason we focused on that symphony is because we have been doing all of the symphonies up until this point on our Masterworks series. And so doing the 4th this year completes the cycle. So that's what started as the genesis of this program. And then to do the Academic Festival Overture, which is one of our favorite pieces, and the first piano concerto, this kind of rounds out this program. And one thing that some of our listeners might, some of our attendees might not realize about this program is that Brahms had a relatively late start as a symphonist. He started writing his first symphony in his 40s. And he was kind of putting that off because he was really afraid of Beethoven and didn't want to, not measure up. And so he had these early attempts for writing a symphony, and one of them turned out to be his first serenade, and one of them turned out to be this first piano concerto, which he wrote at the age of 25. So this was actually an early attempt at symphonic writing, and so we'll get to hear very early symphonic work of Brahms. We'll get to hear his second to last symphonic work as his 4th Symphony, and the Academic Festival Overture sits between the 2nd and 3rd Symphonies. So it's kind of like every era of Brahms, and that it gives it a lot of variety and interest for our Brahms fans.
And Wilson asks, for this familiar piano concerto, is there a particular interpretation that will be presented? Is that entirely the decision of Orion Weiss, or will he arrive at one after rehearsal with Maestro Lawrence Loh and Symphoria?
Oh, that's a great question, Wilson. A lot of people will ask if the interpretation is the soloist's prerogative, or is it the conductor's, or is it a combination of both? And some conductors will insist that it's their way, and some soloists will insist that it's their way only. But ultimately, there's some kind of compromise. And very famously, actually, Glenn Gould was playing this concerto with Leonard Bernstein, the New York Philharmonic, and Bernstein hated the way that Glenn Gould was playing this piece, so much so that he said to the audience before playing the performance, I don't agree with what Glenn Gould is doing, but here it is. And so then it actually made it kind of particularly interesting. I don't anticipate that's going to happen with Orion, because he and I have worked together a lot, and I generally love the way that he does everything. But this is a new piece for us, so we'll get together before that first rehearsal with Symphoria. He and I will go through, we'll hit all the main points, and then when we get to that first rehearsal, I'll know a little bit what his approach is, and then we will figure out how it works with the orchestra, and then he'll listen to the way the clarinet plays a solo, and it might change the way that he thinks of how to play a phrase. So a lot of it is kind of organic, and it happens. In our case, in my case, usually it arises out of the rehearsal.
And finally, Lorraine asks, could you please compare Telemann and Brahms?
Okay, I will say I've never been asked that question. Telemann and Brahms, very different composers, but I've been thinking about it. And first, they're both German composers, so they have that in common. Telemann was one of the most prolific composers of all time, and Brahms was famously hiding music that he didn't feel was worthy of being presented to the world. So there's probably a lot of music that Brahms wrote that we actually have never heard, that he just threw away, or he burned, or he just switched course. Whereas Telemann just was cranking out piece after piece. Telemann is very famous for having written a lot of concertos, and Brahms wrote many concertos as well. They were both performers. Brahms played the piano. Telemann was a multi-instrumentalist. So they have a lot in common as far as just their profiles. They made money in different ways. Telemann was a church musician. Brahms used to play music in the taverns as a young person, just to make money for the family. So they kind of had different ways of making money and making a living as composers. But I think ultimately they're very different composers in very different eras, separated by over 200 years, but both were revolutionary in their own right. All right, so that said, we hope that you'll come to the Brahms celebration. And you have to check out my score. This is a score I've had probably since 1996. So it's a very old score. It has all my symphonies in it. It's falling apart. I had to tape the side of it. Someday you'll have this, Charlie. I'll present it to you once they're all totally committed to memory. But these are pieces that I love so much that I cannot wait to do a program that's all Brahms. And with Symphoria, it's going to be an amazing season opener, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah. Thank you.